Hello everyone, my name is Min Kim. Welcome to Random Coding Session number 3. Today we're going to be building a Durandal single-page application with OAuth integration. I do realize that apps is redundant with SPA acronym being single-page application, but I'm going to leave it there for flavor. The code developed here is open source or will be open sourced and downloadable at ninjacraft.com. This is a random coding session. It's not introductory, it's not advanced, it's just random. If you have any questions, feedback, requests, please leave a comment. If you like what you see, please subscribe. Let's switch over to our coding view. Alrighty. So some people have left me some comments about the audio, and I apologize about that. I have these Logitech USB speakers, which are enormously loud, and at 1% they virtually wake up everyone in the entire family, and with neighbors and dogs and hobos down the street. So after reviewing the videos, they're perfect for me, but I forget that I need to actually watch some other type of YouTube video to see how incredibly loud anything else is, and then adjust my volume to match that. So hopefully the microphone sensitivity is increased and everything will sound better. So let's start with the demo. I'm just going to go ahead and run a previous thing that I read at. So those of you who have built Durandal apps before and looking at the starter kit, this should look relatively familiar. We have the welcome page, the Flickr page, which I'm going to show all content because it's HTTPS. So now we can see non-HTTPS, and it looks basically the same. But we'll notice that we see a login button here, which has been implemented. And once we click the login button, there's a little bit of a postback, and then we see that we have a login ID. That's actually coming from our OAuth provider. So, and we didn't actually see this as a postback. Although this is a single page application, the whole premise of OAuth is that we are never responsible for the actual authentication of a user, which is great because who wants to manage any of that anyways, except for the Facebooks, the Googles, and the LinkedIns, and all the other people who want all of your information. But while for all the app developers, there's a huge amount of value from not having to hold all that secure information or having any type of password losses or whatnot. So I'll be able to click on the little log off button, username disappears, voila, fantastic. Okay. So before we actually get to the actual coding, I did want to talk about the premise of kind of working on a bleeding edge stuff. So you do get burned a lot because you spend hours and hours sometimes just beating your head against the wall and crying because things just constantly are changing at such a rapid pace. And with that, the Durandal starter kit started using Bootstrap 3.0, and there's now a Bootstrap 3.1, which has various breaking changes. So I'm not actually going to be doing anything that's going to be Bootstrap 3.1, but it's just anything that really pertains to this specific. When you're trying to do all the super new, super bleeding stuff, I mean, the things will change pretty much more often than my son's diapers. Okay, so I'm not really going to dive too deep into Durandal or OAuth. There's a lot of video and contents on it, really good content on it, in fact, too. However, if anybody has any comments or want to drive into anything else that has interest, I would be more than happy to make a follow-up video on that. But otherwise, we're just going to go ahead and use Google OAuth provider for the sake of time, and we're not just going to go too deep, and hopefully we should be able to square away pretty quickly. So now off to the code, which everybody was wanting to see. First we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and add a new project. You guys can't really see it because of my camera face picture. And I'm going to go ahead and choose an ASP web application. So let's call this your super awesome SPA app with OAuth, because that's exactly how you would name a project. In it, we have our little ASP.NET Wizard. We're just going to go ahead and pick MVC. In the authentication box, we're going to choose from various values. We're going to leave it to individual user accounts. You can do organizational accounts or Windows accounts, however you see fit, but because our OAuth is actually using the OAuth provider, this is where individual user accounts come in. We'll click OK. Fantastic. It'll bring up a new project, and what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and start off getting some basic stuff first so that the application will behave the way that we want to as we're debugging and testing. Now, one thing that we're going to do is we're going to enable SSL, and most likely if you are building an app that's using OAuth anyways, you're probably going to have some sort of private sensitive thing, so it definitely makes sense to make your application SSL. Take note of the actual SSL URL. Now we're going to go ahead and add the project properties. We're going to click on web. We'll change the project URL to that, start URL to this. These are all just niceties in regards to debugging. There's some behavior in Visual Studio where if you have a specific HTML file selected and you run the debugger, it starts it on that page. And I think that's good for some people who want that behavior, but for me it's always been like a nuisance. And part of the thing about single page applications is that they actually behave like a rich client. So since they act like a rich client, I personally prefer that we always start from like the starting point, having the main screens where you would log in and do your stuff. Okay, so now that that's done, that looks good. Now we're going to go into our app start, and we're going to go to the startup.auth.cs, and we'll uncomment use Google Authentication. Now note, there is a bunch of other providers. There's Microsoft account, Twitter, Facebook, as I mentioned. We're going to again just use the easiest authentication provider for now, and just use the Google Authentication because it doesn't require us to get the whole app ID and the app secrets and stuff like that. Now we're going to NuGet in our Durandal starter kit. Fantastic. We'll click install, and it's going to do a whole bunch of stuff for us. Some good, some bad, and I'll go into a little bit of details as we see it. But it's you pick and choose your battles, and again, you will also determine if you're using Durandal. I try to go all the way as much as possible. So there are some pages where, again, with OAuth and some of the default behavior, you're still going to have some MVC pages and the styling may be lost or whatnot. So you'll have to do just a little bit to make it look consistent. We're not going to focus on the whole styling in this video. So now that we've got it, we've noticed in the views we have a Durandal view and a home view. So what we're going to do is we are going to delete the home view because the Durandal view has pretty much framed up what we want, and we're just going to rename Durandal to home. Fantastic. We're also going to go ahead into the controllers. We're going to delete the home controller, and we're just going to rename the Durandal controller to home controller. Great. We'll go into home controller only because I'm incredibly nitpicky. This is an unnecessary step, in fact, at all to make this work. But anyways, I don't like the curly bracket formatting notation that they put in there. Great. So now we have that. We can go ahead and launch the application just to see what it looks like now. And let's go ahead and do that. We have plenty of time because all of you can fast forward this anyways. So still in the old project. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and set this as started project. Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay, so we have our welcome, our Flickr, and again, it's going to still show the thing about the SSL. Okay, great. So that's what the Durandal starter page looks like. That's what we kind of expected. So now let's go ahead and start getting to things where how we can get the username. So if we go into the account controller, I'm going to actually create a new method. And in this method, I'm just going to go ahead and call it get username. And in the get username, the account controller has a authentication manager, and nested deep inside the authentication manager, you can actually get the identity of the individual who is logged in via the OAuth. So we're going to do that by saying if this dot authentication manager does not equal null, and this dot authentication manager dot user does not equal null, and this dot authentication manager dot user dot identity does not equal null. I definitely debugged to make sure that I couldn't find the username any layer in more shallow to the top. You can also optionally choose not to check for nulls, but then you suffer from null reference exceptions if they come across. So take and pick your battles. I decide just to be safer than sorry. So this is authentication manager.user.identity.name. Fantastic. And now we're just going to go ahead and return it. Okay. So now we have a mechanism to getting the username from the OAuth provider. Great. Oh, and correction. So once the OAuth provider comes in, the OAuth provider can only offer so many things, and what MVC does is they actually create an internal account locally. You can choose how you want to specify the internal account's details. You can actually just not offer the actual users an opportunity to change like a login or whatnot, and then just associate it with the fixed open OAuth identities. Again, for the sake of time, we're not going to go into too much in details of that, but once you start playing around with this, you'll see that there's so many things that you can do with it. Okay, great. So we now have the username function. That's fantastic. Now we're going to go into the Randall world. Oops. All right, and we're going to go to our app folder. And I hate the formatting of this. So I think the rest of the world likes this, and I'm just not in the same frame of mind. And maybe someone could tell me some advice that makes it better. But they have a folder called view models, in which they have all the view models, and then they have a folder called views, which they have the views, the relative views. I prefer having a folder that would be more like Flickr, and then you would have the actual specific view and view models in the single folder, so you can partition it differently. It's just a different pivot of how you like to look at it. I could be wrong, probably wrong. Okay, so we're going to go into our shell.js, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a brand new function. We're going to go ahead and create the composition creation. Let's see, composition complete. Okay, so composition complete, fantastic function, view parent. So this is a function that's invoked after all of the DOM elements have been fully rendered on the actual single page app page. So once you navigate to the page and you wanna be at a state where the DOM is relatively fixed, this is where you want to go. And this is important because we're going to actually do something that changes the state of the application when we want to. So this may not be the best way, and again, if anybody has any input on a better way to do it, I'm all ears. But this is going to be my way. All right, so now in the composition complete, we're also going to add a variable for the username, which is going to be a KO observable. And in the composition complete, well, first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an anti-forgery token. Yeah, and this is essentially because we actually still want to be protecting our application. We're going to still adhere to the anti-forgery tokens that are generated through MVC and then pass them in with our forms. And I'll show a little bit of magic of how that's happening. So we're going to just do it by using jQuery or open parentheses, and we're going to look for input where name equals request verification token. Yeah, fantastic. And then outer HTML. Okay. As you guys can see, I've actually typed this like 3 times. So while I don't have it completely memorized, I think it's, like 90% there. Okay. So now what it's going to do is it's going to then invoke an AJAX request. And our URL will be the account get username. And we could match case, doesn't really matter. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say cache cache. Hang on. Sorry guys, I'm gonna cheat a little bit, and this was actually a new feature that I learned. Cache false. All right. some of you can cheat and see what I'm going to do in the future, right? All right, cache false, great. And then in the done method, I'm going to have a function with the data that's returned, and I'm just going to say, yep. I also do this with Durandal. I'm not sure. I guess this is like a knockout thing. Maybe, well, yeah, mostly Durandal, but instead of having just the way it would return, there's always the issues with scoping in JavaScript, which just make it somewhat of a nightmare. So I always just declare my view model up front, give it a name, return it after. So this way, in any of the callbacks, I can just say vm.username and then do the magic here. Otherwise, you have to do this kludgy thing where you say like var self equals this before it, and then use the scope of the self in the actual callback. Don't want to go too much into that. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to do a jQuery also, and we're going to say we're going to look for a element that we're going to create, and we're going to call it the anti-forgery placeholder. And anywhere we see that, we're going to replace with our anti-forgery token. Okay, so stepping a little bit ahead again, because since we want to actually use the anti-forgery token in the actual invocations of logging in, we're just saying that I actually use a username as a state variable to determine which buttons to show up log in and log out. Essentially, if you don't have a username, then you're not logged in. If you do have a username, you are logged in. So since I use it as a state, I associate that so that I can have the anti-forgery placeholders with the respective inputs. Again, totally welcome for anybody to have offering input on how we could do it any easier, better. Oops, let me close this. It's not what we want. Okay, so now we need to go to our new shell.html. All right, so this search thing is relatively worthless, so we are not going to have it at all. And what we're going to do is we're going to create some knockout if statements. And if the username does not exist, so if there's no username right now, then we're going to want some behavior. Great. And then if the username does exist, then we're going to have the logout behavior. Okay, so we want a login button, and that's all we'll pretty much have. So we're going to have a form. And then our class is going to be, we're just going to go ahead and say like navbar form, and then we're also going to have a pull right. So that's on the right hand side of the form, and then we're going to have action. Oops. And the action is going to go to account external login, and the method is going to be post. Okay, great. We're going to have the input. Here's where we're going to put the forgery placeholder. So we're going to have the input ID anti-forgery placeholder. Okay, and this is going to be a hidden input since nobody actually wants to see the placeholders. All right, I think we can. We also need a button, so both of them will have a button. So we're going to have input name. Input name, or is it value? I think it's value. So value is going to be log in because there's no username right now. We need a class. And the class is going to be navbar button. No, nav button. Navbar. Okay, nothing. So I guess we're just going to have beat button. Alright, and then type is going to be submit. Fantastic. Alrighty. We'll go ahead and copy this now because our actual log off will be similar. So our action is going to be log off instead, and our button will actually be log off. Okay, everything else looks relatively the same. Great. Here the only difference is we have to make sure that we pass in the parameter of the provider, and the value of that is going to be Google. Great. And okay, so now if we finally have a username, what we're going to do is we're going to have a div class navbar text. Great. We'll still also have a pull right. And then we'll just have a span data bind value username. Okay. So much easier when you actually just look at the old code. Again, I'm trying to avoid that as much as possible so that we can see how you actually type it, but you know. Alright. Oh, hang on, I think span wants a closing. Okay, I think everything looks good. Let's just do a build. Unassigned use of local variable name. Okay, that looks good. We're going to build. Let's go ahead and run it and see how it goes. Did I make it the starting project? I think I did. Alright. And it breaks. Okay, outer, unable to get property of outer. Okay. Let's go look at the line here. Input name. Oh, did I not have the closing bracket? So, let me just double check with my notes. So it's anti-forgery token, input name equal request verification token. Looks good. Let me give it another whirl. Let's tell our Internet Explorer not to cache results, or to actually force reload. Let's go back, reload. Let's see. I'm still having a problem with that outer. I may have to edit this if I don't get it this time. I don't want to, or people can just fast forward. Input name request verification token. Oh, duh. Hang on, guys. Totally forgot to put the anti-forgery token in the view, which is cool. Alright, so we're just going to go ahead and drop that sucker right here. HTML.anti-forgery token. Fantastic. Sorry about that. With the insane 700% microphone volume, that might have actually been bothersome. Okay, looks like I forgot to make that hidden. But let's just go ahead and test it. If we click login, we see now that we actually got redirected to Google's page, in which they prompt what we would like as permissions, and we say okay, we accept it. Here's the part where it goes to the ugly original ASP MVC page, where it allows you to specify username on the data returned from Google. So Google actually returned my full name here, and allows the ASP MVC page allows you to change it. Again, you can change the behavior of that to say don't even let it change it, just take in the OAuth ID and the other magical tokens that it has, and then save that in the database and associate the specific user just with that OAuth provider. Anyways, I'm just going to click. I didn't want to change the behavior for this video. We're just going to click register. Fantastic. So now that we have it, look at that fantastic no username here. Let's go see where that is. Things never worked first time. Okay. So if there is a username, we have a log off button with the user that. It looks like it should work. I can hide that button too still. Alright, so I click login. Thing doesn't disappear. Alright, let's try to debug it to see where it's going, but in the meantime, let's make that provider hidden, since nobody wants to see that provider anyway. Alright, so now we know that the value is username, the data bindings to the username and the span. Oh, you know what? Is it text? Is that why? Let's try that. see if this works. Ah, fantastic. So it was text. Again, probably why you should, copy and paste code in demos, but, it works. So anyways, we've just gone through, we've got our Durandal application, and you can, based upon that, you can see how you can create more methods in the account controller that's accessible through your JavaScript with the jQuery Ajax object, so that you can leverage the information about the user within your app and also have it, and also know that you have a securely invocable middle tier, backend tier, middle tier. So yeah, that's basically it. Again, the code that's developed here will be available. I'm just going to go ahead and plop the code that we had that we just written right now onto ninjacraft.com. But otherwise, if you guys have any questions, comments, feedback, if you guys prefer to have videos where you don't see me fumbling about, then I won't be hurt too badly. But otherwise, I hope you guys really enjoyed it, and keep on coding on, guys. I did not think of a song, but we're going back to the screen. It did.